I didn't leave the family business because I couldn't handle the work. I left because my job wasn't to be valued. It was to make my brother look good and take the blame when he didn't deliver. After 11 years, I learned a hard truth. You can't win in a system designed to keep you beneath someone else. My dad started the commercial refrigeration business when I was in high school. It was just him and one technician back then, servicing walk-in coolers and freezer units for restaurants and grocery stores across the metro area. By the time I graduated, he'd built it up to 8 employees and a steady client list. I joined full-time at 21, thinking I'd learn the trade and maybe take it over someday. That was 11 years ago. For the first few years, I did everything. I rode along on service calls, learned the diagnostic work, studied the manuals for compressor systems and refrigerant regulations. I answered phones, scheduled jobs, ordered parts from suppliers, handled the invoicing when our bookkeeper was out. My dad appreciated it, I think. He'd clap me on the shoulder sometimes and say, "You're a hard worker, I'll give you that." My brother Jake joined 3 years after me. He'd been bouncing between sales jobs, never sticking with anything for more than 18 months. But Dad didn't see inconsistent. He saw gifted. The truth is, Jake didn't become the favorite when he joined the company. He'd been the favorite my whole life. Growing up, he was the kid who could charm his way out of anything. Teachers loved him. Coaches gave him second chances. Adults would laugh at his jokes and tell my dad, "That one's going places," and Dad would light up like they were complimenting him. Jake was confident, loud, effortless with people. The kind of man my dad respected because it reminded him of himself. Dad saw himself in Jake, and I was the reliable one. The kid who showed up, did what needed doing, and didn't make trouble. Jake got admiration, I got responsibilities. So when Dad hired him to handle customer relations and new accounts, it wasn't because Jake had earned it. It was because Jake fit the story Dad wanted to tell about his business. And to be fair, Jake was good at the surface level parts. He had that easy charm, knew how to make clients laugh, remembered their kids' names. People liked him immediately. The problem was, Jake didn't like the parts that required follow-through. He'd schedule site visits and then call me an hour before asking me to cover because something came up. He'd promise clients we could have a unit up and running by Friday, then I'd be the one working until midnight to make it happen. When a client called upset about billing or a delayed part, Jake would transfer them to me like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You're better with the details," he'd say, grinning. "I'm more of a big picture guy." I kept the operations running. I built out our scheduling system so we stopped double booking techs. I negotiated better terms with our parts suppliers and cut our lead times down from 2 weeks to 5 days on most orders. When we hired new techs, I trained them. I wrote up the service protocols so we had consistent quality across jobs. I was the one who caught invoicing errors before they went out, who followed up with clients after big installations, who tracked our warranty claims and made sure we stayed on top of code compliance. Dad never said much about it. He'd just hand me another problem to solve. When I was 26, I asked him about a promotion to operations manager. We were sitting in his office after close, and I'd just finished reconciling 3 months of inventory discrepancies that our previous guy had left behind. "I've been managing operations for about a year now," I said. "I think it's time to make it official." He frowned at his computer screen. "You don't need a title to do good work." "It's not about the title, it's about fair pay. I'm doing manager-level work." "You're getting paid fairly," he said. "You're doing well for yourself. Some people your age don't even have jobs." "I'm not asking for charity, Dad. I'm asking for what I've earned." He looked at me then, and his expression hardened. "You know, your problem is you don't appreciate what you have. You've got a steady paycheck, health insurance. I never nickel and dime you on vacation days. You should be grateful instead of always asking for more." I didn't bring it up again for another year. Jake, meanwhile, got promoted to senior account manager about 8 months later. Dad announced it at our quarterly numbers meeting like it was a big accomplishment. Jake had brought in 2 new clients, both small restaurants. The month before, I'd been on site at a grocery location fixing a recurring failure their previous provider couldn't solve. The regional facilities manager watched me work, asked a few questions, and a week later he called and said, "Can your company handle all 18 of our locations?" I put together the plan. I did the pricing. I built the service schedule and response matrix and made sure we could actually deliver on it. At the meeting, Dad had Jake present it like it was his win. "This is the kind of growth we need," Dad said, gesturing at the numbers on the screen. "Jake's really stepping up." I caught Jake smirking at me across the table. The real turning point came during the summer rush about 2.5 years ago. We had a massive installation scheduled for a cold storage warehouse, a $40,000 job, our biggest that year. It was a complicated retrofit, multiple compressor units, strict timelines because they couldn't afford downtime. I'd spent weeks planning it, coordinating with the client, scheduling our best techs, ordering specialized parts. 3 days before installation, our lead tech got into a car accident. Nothing life-threatening, but he'd be out for 6 weeks. The backup tech we'd planned to use quit the same week to take a job in another state. Suddenly, we were two experienced people short on a job that needed precision work. I spent 16 hours a day for those 3 days calling in favors, pulling permits, reconfiguring the schedule. I found a retired tech who agreed to come back for contract work. I got on the phone with the parts supplier and had them rush ship a backup compressor in case we ran into compatibility issues. I personally drove 2 hours to pick up a control panel because waiting for delivery would have put us behind. The installation went perfectly. The client was thrilled. They sent an email to Dad praising the professionalism and skill of our team, and they've since referred 4 other businesses to us. I asked Dad for a raise a week later. $10,000 a year, which would have brought me up to what operations managers made at comparable companies. I'd looked up the numbers. He sighed like I was being difficult. "We just had a lot of unexpected expenses with that warehouse job." "We still cleared about $16,000 after labor and parts," I said, "and I saved it when it could have fallen apart." "I'm not asking based on one win. I'm asking based on what I've been doing for years." "You did your job," he said. "That's what you're supposed to do. We're a family business. Everybody pitches in. That's how this works." "I'm not asking you to give me something I haven't earned." "You know what your problem is?" he said, leaning back in his chair. "You think you're entitled to special treatment because you work hard. Everyone here works hard. You're not special." That one stuck with me. He gave me a 2% raise. Cost of living adjustment, he called it. Jake got a new truck that year. "Company vehicle," Dad said, because he was out meeting clients. I kept working. I probably should have left then, but I kept thinking if I just proved myself a little more, if I just made myself a little more indispensable, he'd see it. We lost a major client that fall because of a screw-up Jake made. He'd promised a restaurant chain we could retrofit all 6 of their locations in 3 weeks. He hadn't checked with me first. It would have taken 5 weeks minimum with our current crew, and we already had 2 other big jobs scheduled. When I told him it wasn't possible, he got defensive. "Just make it work," he said. "You always figure it out." I told him no. I told him he needed to call the client back and give them a realistic timeline. He didn't. He told them we were on track. When we couldn't deliver, they canceled the contract and switched to a competitor. Dad was furious, but somehow he was mad at me. "You should have told me there was a problem," he said. I told Jake. He's supposed to be managing the client relationship. "You should have come to me directly." "I tried that before," I said, "and you told me to stop undermining Jake, to be a team player and sort it out as a team." Dad frowned. "This isn't the same thing. This was a major opportunity. You should have brought it to me." Before I could answer, Jake jumped in. "I mean, if you'd been more flexible with the scheduling, we probably could have made it happen. You're always so rigid about timelines." I stared at him, waiting for Dad to correct that, waiting for him to say, "No, the issue is we promised something we couldn't deliver." He didn't say anything. That's when I started looking at what it would take to do this on my own. The final straw came a little over 2 years ago. Dad pulled me and Jake into his office and said he'd been thinking about succession planning. He was 63, wanted to step back in the next few years. He said he was creating a general manager position, someone to oversee all operations and client relations, essentially run the day-to-day while he focused on strategy. "I've been thinking about this role for a while," he said. "It's a big responsibility." He'd hinted at this before, always in vague terms. I'd assumed, maybe stupidly, that he was talking about me. "I think Jake's ready for it," Dad said. I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Jake. He's got the client skills, the vision. He's a natural leader. I've been running operations for 6 years, I said, keeping my voice level. I've built every system we use. I've trained every tech we've hired in the last 3 years. I've saved us more money and efficiency improvements than Jake's brought in through sales. Dad waved his hand. You're great at the technical stuff, but this role needs someone who can see the bigger picture, someone clients trust. Clients trust me, I said. I'm the one who fixes things when they go wrong. Jake leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. I think what Dad's saying is, you're valuable where you are. We need someone in operations. That's your strength. I am operations, I said. I have been for years, without the title or the pay. Dad's jaw tightened. You know, I'm getting real tired of this attitude. Every time we have a conversation, you're complaining about something. Maybe if you spent less time worrying about what you're getting and more time being a team player, you'd be further along. I've been a team player for 11 years. And you've been paid for 11 years, he snapped. You think you're doing me a favor by showing up? This is a job. You're not owed anything beyond your paycheck. I looked at Jake. He had this little smile playing at the corner of his mouth. I've given everything to this business, I said quietly. Then maybe you need to ask yourself why it's never enough for you, Dad said. Jake's grateful for opportunities. He doesn't constantly have his hand out. I stood up. When do you want my notice? Dad blinked. What? I'm resigning. I'll give you 3 weeks. That should be enough time to transition my responsibilities. You're being ridiculous, Dad said. Sit down. I'm serious. His face went red. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? You're going to quit because you didn't get your way? I'm quitting because you've made it clear you don't value me. Jake laughed, actually laughed. Good luck out there, man. See how far you get without the family name backing you up. I walked out. The next 3 weeks were brutal. Dad barely spoke to me. When he did, it was cold, transactional. I documented every process I'd built, every client relationship, every supplier contact. I trained one of our senior techs to take over scheduling and inventory. I finished out my current projects. I stayed professional. The day before my last day, Dad came into the shop while I was cleaning out my workstation. You're really doing this, he said. Yes. Don't expect me to give you a reference if this doesn't work out. And don't come crawling back when you realize you can't make it on your own. I just nodded. I started my business with $8,000 in savings, a pickup truck, and my own certification credentials. I already owned most of my tools. What I needed was insurance, licensing, and enough cash to float parts, fuel, and the first slow months. I focused on a niche Dad had never been interested in, not because it wasn't real work, but because it wasn't the kind of work he respected. Dad liked big installs and big invoices. He hated small accounts that required fast response times and consistent follow-through. He treated preventative maintenance like busy work. He didn't want contracts that came with after-hours commitments, documentation requirements, and 100 little details that had to be right every month. That's exactly what I built. I created preventative maintenance membership plans for single-location restaurants, bakeries, butcher shops, specialty food stores, places that couldn't afford a cooler going down on a Saturday night. I offered clear response guarantees, seasonal tune-ups, compliance logs, and a simple promise: if you call me, you reach me. My first client came through a former customer who remembered me. Then another referral, then another. Those first 6 months were terrifying. I worked 70-hour weeks. I underbid a job badly in month 2 and barely broke even. I had to learn how to do my own books, my own marketing, my own everything. There were nights I lay awake thinking I'd made a massive mistake, but I kept getting calls. Clients liked that they could reach me directly. They liked that I showed up when I said I would, that I explained things clearly, that I fixed problems instead of making excuses. By month 8, I had enough steady contracts to hire a part-time tech as a contractor to help with maintenance routes and on-call weekends. By the end of year 1, I was bringing in around $30,000 a month in revenue, with enough margin to pay myself more than I ever made at Dad's company and still reinvest in tools, insurance, and a real parts inventory. Year 2, I hired 2 full-time techs, one at a time as the contract base grew, and moved the business out of my apartment. First, it was a small storage unit for parts and tools, then a proper commercial bay. I wasn't getting rich, but I was stable. And every dollar I made was because of my own work. I heard through former coworkers that things at Dad's business were getting rough. Jake had overpromised to 3 major clients in his first 2 months and couldn't deliver. He'd yelled at one of the senior techs for questioning his timeline, and the tech quit. Another guy left a month later. The quality started slipping. Jobs were taking longer. Clients were complaining. Dad kept defending Jake. He blamed the techs for being difficult, blamed the economy, blamed everything except the actual problem. Then they lost the grocery chain account, the one I'd brought in. Apparently, there had been a service failure at one of their locations, and instead of handling it immediately, Jake had tried to reschedule for the following week. The compressor had failed completely, and they'd lost thousands in spoiled inventory. The chain dropped them and switched to another provider. That was last month. 2 weeks ago, Dad called me. First time we'd spoken in more than 2 years. "I want to talk," he said. "Can you come by the office?" I met him on a Tuesday afternoon. The office looked the same, but there was something tired about it. Dad looked older. One of his vendors had tightened payment terms, and a line of credit renewal was coming up. He got straight to it. "I'm prepared to offer you a position as Chief Operating Officer. 85,000 base salary plus 3% profit share. Full autonomy over operations, hiring, and vendor relationships. And we can discuss a pathway to partial ownership over the next 5 years." It was more than I'd ever asked for, more than I'd imagined he'd offer. "We need you," he said, and for a second he almost looked genuine. "The business needs you. Jake's still learning, but he needs someone with your skills to support him. We can make this work. It's what's best for the family." There it was, the same frame he'd always used. "I appreciate the offer," I said, "but I'm not coming back." His expression shifted. "You're being stubborn. This is a generous package." "It is. And if you'd offered me half of this when I asked for a title and fair pay, I might still be there, but I'm not interested." "You're going to throw away the family business over pride?" "I'm not throwing anything away. You made your choice when you promoted Jake over me, when you told me I wasn't special, when you said I should be grateful for the opportunity to be undervalued." He looked at me for a long moment. "So that's it?" "That's it," I said. "If you need a referral for a consultant who can help you rebuild your operation systems, I can recommend someone, but I'm not coming back to fix what you broke." I stood up. He didn't try to stop me. Walking out of that office for the second time felt different than the first. There was no anger, no hurt, just clarity. I built something on my own terms. I don't have to beg for respect or prove my worth to people who've already decided I don't matter. And I sleep better at night knowing that the success I have is mine, not something I'm waiting for someone else to give me permission to claim. Some doors close for good, and sometimes that's exactly how it should be. If you enjoyed this one, leaving a like helps, and subscribing means you'll catch the next story.